So today, for our discussion, we're going to be talking about boundaries with sadness. There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried. There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried. That is Archbishop Oscar Romero of San Salvador who said that. And in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, Psalm 34 and verse 18, it says that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. So one of the things that we know about sadness is that God is close to us in our sadness, and he cares about our sadness, and he can be near to us in those times. One of the books that I've read in the past is a book by Henry Nouwen. It's called The Life of the Beloved. And we actually went through this book in this group. And one of the things that Henry Nouwen does is that he talks about our own lives in the light of communion or the Lord's Supper. And he uses that as a model for our own pain. So he talks about how when we're going through our experiences of suffering, we can be taken, we can be blessed, we can be broken, and then we can be given for the world. Those are the words that's used about the Lord's Supper. It's taken, it's blessed, it's broken, and then given for the world. And if you think about the experiences that you've been through, that could be true of you, that you can be taken, you can be blessed, and you have been broken in your sadness, but then you can be given to the world through that, because there are some things that we only learn through sadness. One of the processes that we've been talking about here for quite a number of weeks now is this idea of focusing on a part of us or an emotion, befriending that part or emotion, inviting that part or emotion to Christ, and then finding a way there to unburden that with Christ, and then to be able to integrate that particular part or emotion with all the other parts and emotions that are inside of us. So this is called internal family systems. And so I just want to tell you about an experience that I had with sadness. So I had two girls at this time, the time that I'm thinking, and my wife was pregnant. So we were going to have a third child. What we didn't know is what that third child was going to be. And as we were getting closer, one of the things I realized is that I really had inside of me this desire to want to have a boy. And that became clear to me as we got closer to the ultrasound. And as it turns out, I had to sort of write out some things about this because I was going through a program and the word sadness came up and I had to write about sadness. And it turned out I was sad that I did not yet have a boy. And as it turned out, I was anticipating if I didn't have a boy, that was going to be even more sad when I had that third child. And so what happened was when that part of that sadness part emerged, what also happened was that there was another part that emerged, which I would call an internal manager. So there's an internal manager inside of me telling me that I should not feel sad and that I needed to tamp that sadness down because it really wasn't that big of a deal that I didn't have a son. Also, the internal manager is also telling me that sadness is hard. And if I got sad about this thing, it might overwhelm me and I might end up making a big mountain out of this thing that was more like a molehill. So this was what was going on inside of me, a sad part of me, and then this manager that was trying to take care of the sadness and sort of cover it over. What I ended up doing was befriending that sadness instead of tamping it down. I realized tamping doesn't work well for me. I did it when I was a kid and I lost my mother and my stepfather to very violent deaths. And so as it turns out, that came out sideways with me wanting to kill myself. So I realized tamping down doesn't work for me. So I found out that this part of me remembered really well playing sports with my dad and how that father and son bond. And so that part of me was looking forward to that father-son bond with my own son. But I knew that wasn't going to happen if my third child was a girl. And I pretty much knew that was going to be the last child. There wouldn't be any more after that. Because my wife had very difficult pregnancies. All three pregnancies were very difficult. And I knew that she was high risk. We weren't going to have another child. But I was able to invite this sad part of me to Jesus. And as I reflected on it in God's presence, I received a tremendous amount of comfort. And I was able to unburden that part of me that felt so much burden about this. And in place of the sadness, God gave me acceptance of whatever was coming. Again, I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I knew I needed to be prepared for it. And as it turns out, the ultrasound showed that we were indeed not going to have a boy, but we were going to have another girl. So I would have 3 girls. And I learned a lesson about my sadness, that in order to receive this new child as a gift, I would first have to feel my grief and let God minister to it. Now, whenever that manager tries to shut down the parts of me that need to grieve, I can remind the manager of this experience. I need to feel what's going on, and I need to feel what's going on so I can get through it, and it will not overwhelm me because God is with me in this process. If our sadness gets too close to us, we will experience loneliness, we may experience self-pity, we may experience depression. But if our sadness is too far away from us, we will deny it, and we will deny its importance. And if what happens to you happened to me, it's going to pop up when we least expect it. So we really need to be careful about this. I want to talk briefly about the benefits of sadness, the dangers of sadness, the need that sadness has, and the fears that come along with sadness. So let's talk about the benefits first. The benefits are that sadness reminds you of your need for God and for others. And in that moment, I really needed God. And it was clear, and I was able to go to God and get help. Sadness helps us become aware of a personal loss or a burden that needs to be examined. If I didn't have sadness in my life, I wouldn't have been able to tap into that thing that was deep down in there that I didn't even realize was there until I slowed down long enough to reflect on what was happening to me. Sadness also helps us understand the things that we love deeply. And my relationship with my dad was a good relationship, and I remember those fond memories. And sadness helped me tap into that I wanted that so badly for myself in the future. Also, what sadness does is it helps you develop empathy and come alongside others who are suffering. Think of the people who have helped you through your suffering. They're probably people who have suffered and have dealt with tremendous sadness. What dangers are there with sadness? Well, if we don't deal with our sadness in a healthy way, then we may feel like we're invisible. We may feel like we're worthless. We may feel like we're unloved. Another danger of sadness is that sadness kind of spiraling into depression and despair. We've seen a lot of that in the news the last couple of years with high-profile people taking their own lives. Sometimes weariness and exhaustion comes with sadness, or we ruminate about painful memories. So that picture of someone watching the old memories on a video and watching them over and over again and only watching the difficult ones. So what does sadness need? Well, sadness needs a safe place to grieve the people, relationships, or opportunities that we've lost. Sadness needs validation of the sorrow that it holds instead of a quick fix. How many of us in our sadness have found someone that they want to give us a word, or they want to tell us this phrase or something that's magically supposed to make us not feel sad? And we know that that doesn't really work. Sadness also needs a gentle boundary so that it can find its rightful place in your internal family and become your ally. So in my case, I needed to set a boundary around that sadness and say, okay, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to reflect on this, but I'm not going to let this thing overwhelm me. I'm going to give this to God. And then, of course, there are some fears that come along with sadness. Some of us feel like if we move forward with our lives, maybe it's someone that's deceased and we love them, and we're thinking if we move on, that loved one that we're grieving is going to be forgotten. Sometimes we think that if we forgive, that implies that our pain never happened. Sometimes we think that if we expose our sadness, that it's really going to drive people further away from us. They're not going to want to be anywhere near us. And then the last thing I want to mention is the causes of sadness. What are some of the causes? Well, sometimes we've lost something good. We've lost, say, a family member, and that's the loss of something good. Sometimes we've lost something bad. Maybe it's a way of living, or maybe it's a way of sinning that we have become accustomed to. Or maybe it's an unhealthy pattern in our lives. And when that thing gets cut off, or when that thing is removed from our lives, that can be a grief to us. And also, they could be the loss of what might have been. How many of us had dreams that were unfulfilled, or a career that didn't go well, or a relationship that never was, or not having children, or physical limitations that we may be up against right now. All of these things need our spirit-led attention. If you're a Christian, you have the Spirit living inside of you. And if you have the Spirit living inside of you, that means the Spirit can minister to these sad parts of you. And the Bible has a word for that. It's called lament. And this signifies not weakness. Lament isn't about weakness. Lament is about faith. It's taking the things that you're upset about and speaking them out in the presence of God. And if you look right in the middle of the Bible, there's a book in there, 66 books in the Bible. The middle one is the book of Psalms. It's one of the longest ones, has about 150 chapters. And those Psalms, many of them, like 2/3 of them, are laments. They're full of sadness. And so we can read those. That was the music book of the Hebrew people, the music book of the church in the New Testament. And so we realize that God understands our lamenting, and he understands when our sadness, and he wants to hear from us in our sadness. There's a woman named Joni Eareckson Tada. I've heard her speak before. She turns suffering that she had with physical paralysis in her body. She dove into a body of water and I think she hit her head and ended up with paralysis. She turned that experience into a ministry to millions of people, to help people like her, people in wheelchairs, people disabled. And she wrote this. She said, "The inner anguish that we have forces us to embrace God out of despair, out of urgent need. God is never closer than when our heart is aching." So in our sadness, God can be very near and dear to us. And if we think about the cross of Christ is going to redeem every last painful experience in our lives. At the end of the world, all these painful experiences that we have, the tears are going to be wiped away from our eyes. But of course, until then, we still have sadness. What we need to realize is that the Spirit of God actually prays for us. Sometimes we don't even know what to pray for. We're so sad, we can't even get the words out. But it says that the Spirit makes intercession for us with groanings that cannot even be uttered. So we're going to end our discussion here. This is a discussion on a book called Boundaries for Your Soul. It's a book by Allison Cook and Kimberly Miller. And what it gets into is internal family systems that we've been really talking about here for a number of weeks. You can look back and see some of our videos from previous weeks. Next week, we're going to move on to the idea of boundaries for your envy and for your desire. So sometimes the things that we desire kind of get out of control. And we're going to talk about how we can place boundaries around those so that we can be more healthy.